You've probably heard it before, and it's true. Trucking is the backbone of America.
If somehow you waved a magic wand and you got rid of trucking, basically in about 96 hours, society is over. Within 24 hours, you have like no water, and within 48 hours, you have no food, and within 72 hours, you have no prescription medicine, and in 96 hours, you have no fuel, and it's just anarchy.
As important as it is to keep our country going, the roots of its fatal flaw run deep. It's an incredibly wasteful business. But according to Drew McElroy, it doesn't have to be that way. I'm Doug Fraser, and this is what we do. Before we get into Drew's plans to solve things, let's transport back in time. Here's 12-year-old Drew.
Hi.
He spends his summers working at his parents' freight brokerage business. The process was as old school as you can get. Paper forms, communication through CB radios. Drew spent his childhood learning the business, and when it came time, he went to college, which was a major deal considering he was the first person in his family to do so.
When I was growing up, my family, didn't come from a lot, and my parents worked incredibly hard to ultimately, amongst other things, provide me an education that allows me to do the things that I do. And I remember when I was in high school, like any other high school kid, I was a bit of an asshole. I was a pretty good kid, but we have our moments. And I remember I did something that really, really irked my mother. I don't even remember what it was, but it really irked her. And it was one of those, I'm not mad, I'm disappointed moments, which we all dread, She said, for those people who get a lot, there is a lot expected of them. And I remember even like in my sort of teenager, jerky brain, it really struck a chord. And I guess moms have a way of doing that. And I remember thinking, looking at all the people around me, my parents had afforded me tremendous, tremendous opportunity. I damn sure better not waste that.
He eventually branched off from the family business to carry out his own master plan. He was going to use technology to automate the freight brokerage process. Basically, he wanted to bring trucking into the 21st century. This would in turn reduce wastefulness, increase transparency, and in general, make everyone in the industry happier and wealthier. But getting there wasn't going to be easy. He partnered with tech wizard Jonathan Salama, and together they co-founded Transfix. After some long struggles for funding, they eventually got the money they needed. But there were still plenty of hurdles left to go, and one of them was trucking's distinct culture, which is tough on new ideas.
There's no bullshit in this industry, right? Like people in trucking and logistics work hard. These are granular people who, get dirty and get tired. And so they don't have a lot of tolerance for like what I would call generally BS, right? Like if you're they're open-minded. I mean, again, it's not the most early adopting of industries, but we're getting better. But there is a absolute undertone to everything of put your money where your mouth is. You want to talk about this new technology that you think is cool? Well, you damn well better be able to show it to me. Otherwise, I haven't got time for you. I won't make any value judgments of whether it's good or bad, but that's who we are.
The pushback comes from the legacy of the business itself. Trucking runs on deadlines.
There's nowhere to hide when you're supposed to be there at 3 p.m. and you're not. There's no fudging that. Like, this is just what the business is based upon.
At a high level, Drew's company Transfix is pretty simple. It helps large companies like Target, Staples, Unilever, you name it, to ship their goods to where they need to go to be sold.
And that's done through what would look like a commodity-like trading marketplace of individual trucks. We work with several 100,000 individual, independent and small trucking companies and truck drivers to ultimately help them effectively position their assets and make sure goods are where they're supposed to be. Our business is a significant amount of the value creation is predicated on the use of technology to eliminate waste. Trucks driving around empty, drivers sitting around not doing anything, et cetera, et cetera. It's insidious and massive. So what a beautiful clean tech story, or so I thought. But in the reality of 2014, it was more like, who the hell are you? I'm looking for the next great thing in battery technology. Trucking is dirty. Get out of my office.
Historically, trucking is an incredibly wasteful business, and they know it. If I told you that every year, 1 million miles are driven empty by truckers, what would you think? Well, the truth is, 1 million empty miles would be incredibly efficient compared to the actual number.
In the United States, annually, there is something in the neighborhood of 54 billion miles driven empty by Class 8 trucks. These are 40,000-pound vehicles when they're empty that are obviously driving around. The miles per gallon from a diesel perspective is something like 6 miles per gallon, and the cost to operate a truck, sort of the what I would call the variable cost per mile, just to break even, is something like $1.70. So you can do the math on the sort of implications of how much money is being just lit on fire every year in this business. I mean, we're heating the house with the windows open. It's sort of hard to fathom, right? Like the human brain, can only go into so many orders of magnitude before you fail to really grasp what we're talking about. And the craziest thing about all of this is that figure I cite is just within the United States. And the fact of the matter is the United States is actually the most efficient at this globally. So you can imagine what that number looks like on a global basis, just complete waste of time, money, resources, emissions, impact on infrastructure, the entire gamut. And that's ultimately, why, amongst other reasons, but that's at the core of why we founded the business to tackle that problem.
Why are there so many empty containers?
So there's a variety of issues, right? So the first one, and I'm gonna limit our conversation to the United States because I'm certainly not an expert on the intricacies of all the global markets. But in the United States, you've got a couple of things happening. Firstly, you've got some structural macroeconomic factors that are, I don't think that there's necessarily a solution for, right? So the first is all of our food is grown in California. And I'm being somewhat flippant here. Of course, not all the food, but a lot, right? California is the agricultural basket of the United States. Further, a vast majority of the products that we consume, or I wouldn't say a majority, but certainly a large percentage of the products we consume are imported from Asia. And by and large, they come into the West Coast ports, specifically Long Beach in Southern California. So you've got all of this product that accumulates on the West Coast. And you've got the vast majority of the people living on the East Coast. So for every 3 shipments coming from California to the East Coast, there's only 1 going back. So that in and of itself creates this sort of, skewed market where it's difficult, or let's say it's not easy to match up my trip out with my trip home, right? Further, the nature of trucking in the United States is such that the industry is incredibly fragmented. There's about 3.5 million truck drivers by profession in the United States. It's actually the number 1 most common job title on like an IRS, tax return in the United States. Teacher is number 2. So you got 3.5 million truck drivers, but you have 600,000 trucking companies. So you have an average of something like, 5, 6, 7 drivers per company, which is to say they're very small. And as you can perhaps imagine, the vast majority of companies that ship goods in significant quantities are quite large. So all of that leads to friction is probably the best way to describe it. And so what has happened historically is you've got this industry called freight brokers who are effectively coffee bean traders, right? I mean, the sort of historical, I don't want to say parody, but the sort of, mental image that this conjures up is like the guys with the green visors in smoke-filled rooms with like 4 phones on their desk. Because literally that's what it was. I mean, you would get the driver and call, I'm empty in Des Moines, Iowa. And the guy would start calling people to find this personal load. I mean, that's the way it worked.
Old school methods served the industry well for a long time, but the continuously increasing demand of consumers means more trucks on the road and more companies to communicate with. And that's where things start to fall apart.
So how much of the big issue that we're talking about here stems from poor communication or just the lack of it?
Historically, and I know this is probably going to be hard for people to believe, but it's true. No one knows where anything is. No one has any idea. So, and I mean that quite literally. You would ship several $100,000 worth of goods. We as a company have purchased. They've come into the port of Long Beach. They've come off the ship. They're sitting in a warehouse that I need to bring to, call it Atlanta to sell to my customers, right? It's some consumer product for the sake of this conversation. And I'm the brand and I'm selling it to the retailer, right? And so I've got to deliver it to this retailer's distribution center. And I have an appointment on Tuesday at 10 a.m. What we don't know is that on Monday evening, the driver decided to abscond with the freight and has stolen it and sold it. We have no idea. We find that out on Tuesday. If the delivery appointment was at 10 a.m., sometime around 1 p.m., our customer is going to call us screaming, wondering where the heck the product is. And that's how we find out, oh, we've got a problem. I mean, that's literally the way it works historically.
Cargo theft in the U.S. is somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $10 billion a year, and much of that is organized.
And again, I've got stories. I mean, there are people out there who are very savvy, and that stuff can get very tense. I mean, to the point where, obviously, in some circumstances, people's lives are literally on the line. Other times, people's livelihoods and careers are on the line. So it gets very, very serious very quickly.
So Drew and his team turned again to technology to solve the issue. They created a mobile app for truck drivers that passively sends information. And that's a key point, because it requires no work from the truckers. The integration becomes seamless.
And now we've got the dynamic real-time availability of truck supply nationally. That's a big step, right? We've just aggregated across thousands of companies. I mean, the largest trucking company in the entire country employs about 9,000 drivers. We have got several 100,000.
So now all of that data is aggregated, which streamlines the supply side of things with real-time visibility, and of course plays a role in cutting down theft. But there are many more problems to solve, some of which don't have a digital solution yet. For example, imagine it's Black Friday. The retailer needs the inventory because, well, it's Black Friday, and the brand needs it there to hit revenue numbers. One small slip-up can lead to disaster.
Everybody is extra intense.
And then
the truck gets a flat tire. These things happen. You can't drive on a flat tire. You have to stop the truck and change the tire. That takes time. But nobody wants to hear that.
A digital network can help share the information about the flat, but as of today, it can't fix it. Maybe Drew will figure this one out in the future, but for now, he's working on the next level of communication and planning.
Which is moving from the transactional, where is, Jim and where does he have to go tomorrow, to what does our network look like? And why do we keep shipping water from New York to Chicago just to send it back to New York to sell it to a customer there? That seems kind of silly. Is there a way to look at the aggregate of what's happening and re-engineer the network? So data and communication are absolutely foundational to what we do, and frankly, for how we drive value.
It's awesome to have that real-time data, but it seems like with these large companies, there's a lot going on. How quickly can you actually implement those solutions?
Well, therein lies the rub, right? I think that depends very much on who you are as a company, right? We, as you can imagine, we love all of our customers. The reality is they exist on the spectrum from some of the most sophisticated and progressive, daring companies to, frankly, some businesses that are, either more traditional or maybe even a little bit laggardy, depending on how you want to define these things. The reality is organizations are complicated and change is hard. Human beings, we all know this, are not comfortable with change. And so you got to do it in a way that is palatable, or else you're not going to get very far. But ultimately, some progress, even if it's a little bit slower, is better than none.
They say waste not, want not. But in the case of American trucking, it's want more, waste more, a challenge that Drew and others like him are putting their life's work into. In the hands of the right minds, technology can help solve industry issues that most of us don't even know exist, but have global economic and climate impacts. I can't help but think about high school-age Drew, the one sitting in the kitchen getting life-changing advice from his mom. If he could see himself now, what would he think of the problems he's helping solve and the responsibility he's taken on for the long, winding, and complex road ahead?
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. Would you mind leaving a rating and review for the show? It only takes a moment and it's a huge help. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. Until next time, stay curious. What We Do is produced by me, Doug Frazier, for WHRO Public Media.